residential tech talk, evangelist, lighting specialist, residential tech.
Welcome to Residential Tech Talks. I'm Jeremy Glowacki, Executive Editor of Residential Tech Today. On this week's podcast, Jason Knott joins us again from his home office in Sturbridge, Massachusetts, where he now serves as Data Solutions Architect and Evangelist for Data by DTools. It was only 10 episodes ago that Jason came on to discuss his newly created role at DTools, where he works with a special team to define and deliver industry analytics and insights. Well, some of those results are now included in a very thorough 2023 Midyear Market Health Report. I want to discuss those findings in detail, but also share our guest's new perspective on the recent CEDIA Expo show, now that he's not moderating like 100 panels on the smart stage or trying to meet with every exhibitor on the show floor in his former role as editor-in-chief at CE Pro. So let's jump right in and talk all about that. Jason Knott, great to have you back. Sorry you're not feeling well. Got that trade show cold. I hope we'll be able to manage without too much struggle today.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy. And again, I apologize up front. I'm a little hoarse here, but just got, like you said, the trade show cold, I guess.
Yeah, I know a lot of people came home sick, and unfortunately several with COVID. And I've got sort of psyched out when I started reading all that and thought for sure I was going to get sick, but I lucked out, fortunately. But even when I saw you the one time, which was in your hotel lobby waiting in line at the gift shop trying to find something to fix your sore throat. You weren't sick yet, but you had kind of blown out your voice that night before at the music performance, trying to talk over the music. So
yeah, that was a good sore throat. That was from just talking and, having fun again at the show with people.
Yeah.
And I lost my voice really quickly that first night. So no, it was different, but yeah, I guess we're doubling up on the sore throat stuff here, aren't we?
Yeah. Well, you must have had a totally different experience there at CEDIA Expo, not having to do so many things like you have done in the past, being on that smart stage all the time. And not that that's like, I mean, those are the fun kind of things to do. It's organizing, getting ready for them. Probably that's the hardest work. But when you actually get to sit on a smart stage and talk, I find that really invigorating. Going around booth to booth, trying to meet with every exhibitor and try to remember what you've learned. That's also difficult. But what was it like this time? You're in a totally different capacity in your new role.
Yeah, it's probably the same way that you felt when for all those years you did the dailies and were running around like a chicken with your head cut off at the show, really not getting a chance to really experience the vibe of the show because you're reporting on it, then going back to your hotel room and writing up that night and all those sorts of things. So this was actually, I think, as I said earlier, this was fun for me to be able to come to the show and see everybody. And, everybody was really congratulatory for me in my new role. And from my standpoint, I was really kind of touting what you kind of set up there, that, data is the new oil, as they say, and talking to people about what we're doing on the data side and how we can possibly help them run their businesses, and got a great reception. And it was great to see all the old friends. And it kind of reminded me of a pre-COVID CEDIA, where nobody was worried about, even though people did catch COVID, but nobody was worried about it, at least. And everybody was having fun. There was a ton of parties, and, it was a great vibe.
Yeah, I agree. The vibe was really good. And were you able to pick up on anything from a technology trend standpoint? I think when I talked to Walt Zerby after the show, he acknowledged the thing that I always say when everybody's talking about what's the big thing. There's really never that big thing anymore. It's incremental evolution of product. When you've covered this as long as we have, things don't just like come out of nowhere. You've been observing them over time. So. But you do see some trends, and I noted a few of them because, again, I got to be a guest on a panel right at the end, and I was going to have to come up with a list of things. And so the whole time I'm there, and plus, just because people are still going to ask that question, what am I going to say to them? So anything you kind of gleaned just as you ran from meeting to meeting and tried to kind of see what was going on around you?
Well, it is going to be interesting. That's something I hope to be able to do some research on is the video wall trend.
Yeah.
And, seeing, I'm hearing from, manufacturers and integrators who are now deploying video walls instead of projectors, or maybe they're putting proposals that have an option of a projection-based dedicated solution versus a video wall solution. And there was I think Planar and Samsung, Barco, Quantum Media just had video walls. There was a lot of video walls there, which I think fed into this first time having the Commercial Integrator Expo there. I don't know how successful that was, but it probably worked well for companies like, Crestron and Legrand and Snap One that want to cater to both audiences. But the video walls are really kind of a crossover opportunity that's coming from the commercial side into the resi side. So I'm hoping to do some research on that and really get a gauge of how strong that trend is.
What I liked about that category was that, early on, it's still a very expensive category. So you look at it like, is this really a replacement of any projectors or even the larger just LCD, LED panels? But when you start to see, yes, some of the prices have come down a little bit, but also the simplification of the installation is a big story. Whether it's just video walls as an organization saying, we'll do all this for you and we'll source everything so you don't have to think about what you're putting together and designing with. Planar has had a service all along, to do installation. And then there's Samsung doing things like modular panels where you have it's a 2-piece thing instead of having to do all the little cubes. So there's different solutions when, trying to make this happen for the industry. And, you still have the question mark, and CEDIA is even addressing this in their standards when they do their video standards. It's how do you incorporate the audio in a theater setting? So if you're putting this in a room where it's like a big wall on the side of your living space, that you have a surround system already kind of in all the in-wall speakers. But if you're doing it more of a theater setup, you can't have that behind this screen audio solution anymore. So that becomes unique. But you put it underneath, you put it around it, it can be done. It's just more things to kind of have to gain value, add value from the integrator standpoint, solving that problem. Some of the other stuff that I saw, it's just a lot of media over IP, obviously. We've been seeing that for a while, and it's not exciting to talk about, but it's a thing that is very important for a lot of installations, distributing that media around the house. So several things going on there. But hey, let's talk about your data, though. I really wanted to drill down into this report. And one of the lead pieces from it was that revenues fell by an average of 5.2% in the first half of the year, with month-by-month tracking. And you're basing this on 100,000 project proposals created by integrators using D-Tools Cloud. So it's a sizable number, a data sample there. And you went into a great description of why that probably was the case, several factors. Maybe you can touch on that piece first in the observations you made.
Yeah, so first put a quick caveat on it. It's the D-Tools is a design and proposal software, D-Tools Cloud and D-Tools System Integrator. And the negative 5.2% was the average project size down. And the number of projects was pretty much even. So
okay.
In essence, it was that. But I do want to put a caveat on it because it's not necessarily total revenues, because D-Tools just introduced its service module in the spring. And so we don't really know how much, what percentage of integrators now are drawing revenue from the service side. Next year we'll be able to, because we'll probably have that a year under our belt to be able to see how much they're getting from it. So just want to clarify, it's not necessarily the total company revenues, but it's the project size. And again, the number of projects was pretty much steady. So
okay.
A couple of things, that to me kind of stand out from the report, and again, it's up as a free download on D-Tools website for anybody who wants to grab it, was that the closing rate was just 40%. So only 4 out of 10 proposals were actually being converted into a sale, which kind of surprised me. I thought it would be higher, but a couple of pieces of data that for your audience that's not in the report that I ran in preparation for our call, that 26% of dealers reported that they closed over half their proposals, which is positive. 10% closed 2 out of every 3. 6% closed more than 3/4, and 3% of dealers closed every single proposal that they proposed on the residential side. So a little more detail there for your audience that's not in the report. Now, on the flip side of that, 2% of integrators reported that they didn't successfully close a single residential proposal. They were shut out on the residential side. So, which is interesting. So, but, just anecdotally talking to integrators, 40% seemed low. I don't know what your impression was. To me, I thought it would have been much higher, that they wouldn't be producing a proposal unless they were a little more sure they were going to get the deal.
Yeah, and that's not just they had to adjust the proposal and resubmit. That's actually just not going to work with that client in that project.
Yeah, it wasn't duplicative where, let's say you're doing 3 versions of a proposal for a customer. That was winnowed out. So this was pure for new customers. So
well, that just makes you think about the time spent and the time, I don't know if you want to say wasted, but you talk about efficiencies in our industry, and that is surprising that you would need to put all that work into something and not get any results from it in that particular case.
It also kind of goes to the need for lead generation, because you've got to be able to produce be able to find those customers to be able to produce the volume of proposals that you want if you're only going to close 4 out of 10. So it kind of puts more of an emphasis back on that part of the business, whereas during this COVID thing, guys were just, the phone was ringing off the hook. So we'll see. The other thing that was interesting, and I want to I think draw out for your audience that I didn't really emphasize in the report, and I probably should have, was that 47% of what was in the quote ended up making it into the proposal. So my deduction there was, boy, this is a lot of value engineering, that you're going in, let's just say, with a $100,000 proposal, and you're ending up with a $47,000 project. That's compared to the first half of last year, when it was 58% was making it into the project. So there was quite a drop. But the one thing I should have included in there is, for many integrators, it's a tactic to purposely go in with a proposal that is above the budget limitation of the customer. So if the customer says, I got a $100,000 budget, a lot of integrators will go in with a $125,000 proposal, because otherwise they know they're not going to possibly get 100. They could never get 105 or 110,000 out of that job if they went in with just 100,000, because they know they're going to get some value engineering. So it's, and in many cases, I think, a purposeful tactic of an integrator to go in with a proposal that's higher than the stated budget by the customer. So it makes this value engineering number look a little lower than it really probably is, because most integrators that I talk to do exactly what I just described.
Yeah, I mean, it's like kind of going into negotiation and obviously going high, because it's going to go, someone's going to say low, and then you get somewhere in between. That's probably a good assumption that that's what's going on. Any other theories though on what might have happened there, just year to year comparison, just in terms of what was available to put in the job, maybe from the supply chain, or any other issues that might have happened economy wise, where they just like, I'm not going to spend as much as I thought I could.
Yeah, and I speculate in the report that that could be a sign of just that more influx of consumer grade products getting into the proposals. So now we're seeing, I don't want to call out specific names, but we're seeing a lot of manufacturers who also sell direct to consumer and have really good quality products that the integrator can professionally install, that are not necessarily margin-laden products for them. So, which feeds into one of the other more surprising, or kind of I'll call the most alarming part of the report, which we could talk about on the blend between labor and equipment. But that's my speculation, that I think there's more consumer grade, and then it could be like you just said, maybe consumers, being a little more hesitant. They're maybe worried about the economy. The first half of the year, I did a month. The report goes month by month, and you can see the first 3 months of the year were much worse than the spring. So remember, we can think back, inflation was still, really high at the beginning of the year. And so I think that might have been a concern, and consumers were just being hesitant. And then obviously, as things ramped up in the spring, it could be reasons like that. Now we're getting more outdoor projects that are being brought in, whereas dealers aren't necessarily bidding on outdoor projects in January and February, maybe. So
how hard is it for you in your research to remember those milestones in the year that you're analyzing? Because it all blurs together for me. Like I look back, I'm like, oh yeah, the inflationary stuff was really big at the beginning of the year, and I can't believe we're already in September. Like I almost had to stop and like, are we September? I lose track of where we are in the year because it goes by so quickly, and then to have to like remember what were some of those factors. Are you just good at that, or you have to like go and kind of do a little bit of digging and what the big headlines were nationally?
Yeah, no, I think when I saw the month-to-month numbers, I was like, okay, what's going on here? Why was the first quarter pretty bad, and then it started ramping up, and you could kind of get a sense that this is, I think, truly showing that it's back to the new norm, or the old norm, I should say. And I'm not talking about Norm from Cheers, but the old norm of that the market, the custom installation market really mirrors the economy closely.
Mm-hmm.
COVID was a complete anomaly.
Yeah.
But now I think the industry is back to mirroring the state of the economy. And so the interesting thing, it'll be interesting to see what happens in the second half of the year, because the second half of last year was down 4% from the first half of last year. So not year over year, but from first half to second half of 2022, the second half was down 4%. So we'll see what happens in the second half of this year. Again, knowing that the things were on the rise in the spring, and we'll see if that's been sustained in the summer and in the fall here.
Right. Well, and you went into some detail about the effect of the higher cost of labor, which is just across all businesses right now a factor. Lack of labor, labor shortage, and just general high cost of labor, in addition to the inflationary factors. So, what were your observations there from a data standpoint?
Yeah, so that was, as I hinted, the most alarming part of this to me. Surprising and alarming was that 77% of projects were still the revenue was coming from equipment, and only 23% coming from labor. And we've been talking, you and I have been talking, forever about valuing your labor, the value that the integrator brings as an expert, and how important that is, especially in this era of DIY, with so many products that are DIY, that they've really got to show the value of their labor. So I was surprised that it was only 23%. I did a little digging. I talked to Matt at Vital, and he was saying, it should be absolutely, integrators should be over 30% on their labor as a percentage of the business. And then I looked around at some general statistics for other professional home-based contractors, and the numbers were much higher. You hear anecdotally at the electricians, it's like 70% labor is their business. And then I found a stat on HVAC where they're between 40 and 50%. So the market still has a long way to go from that standpoint. And that actually surprised me.
Yeah. It is surprising that we haven't made more inroads in that area. I feel like it's almost as if the manufacturers have coddled the industry so long, the integrators, just with, you have to compete with that margin conversation, your profits, on the actual hardware. And there's never been that transition really taking place. The integrator seems to kind of drive that almost necessity from the manufacturers to stay like that, but they haven't been able to make that switch over, or they just don't feel confident and really valuing the labor like they should.
Yeah, and that's one of the other reasons that you and I have talked so long about recurring revenue as a vital part of the business. To if you're not going to be able to get the labor rates that you probably should be getting, or be able to at least bring the revenues in on the labor side, that you've got to kind of cushion that with some sort of a recurring revenue stream for your business, whether it's service or monitoring or whatever it might be. So,
well, you would think that when you do talk about the labor rates, you're also looking at the competitive notion of people wanting to go somewhere where they're making more money as a technician, and that pushback to the owners of these companies saying, I'm having to pay my people more, I need to charge more for that labor to my clients, should be reflected in my billing, I guess, right? So I think that would kick in.
I guess the positive way to look at it is, I should have mentioned, it was 23% coming from labor, but last year in the first half it was only 21%. So it was actually up 2%, but you hit on it. That, I think, is just a reflection of the higher pay that they've been having to pay due to inflation.
Right.
So I don't necessarily think it's them, adjusting their labor rates to where they should be, based on what they should be making from a revenue and a margin and a profit standpoint. I think it's mainly just to cover their labor costs.
Yeah. Today's episode of Residential Tech Talks is brought to you by NICE, the global manufacturer of smart home security and building automation solutions. NICE is bringing together 30 years of innovation with award-winning products from ELAN, SpeakerCraft, and Panamax to create a holistic ecosystem for builders, integrators, and consumers. Learn more about how you can create one home with one solution at go.niceforyou.com/RTT. Moving into product categories, you noted which were some of the more often proposed products, and it said, not surprisingly, electrical products, which includes cabling, power supplies, connectors, and closures, junction boxes, surge protectors, all that fun stuff that's infrastructure. That's kind of like the top of the list, right? But what was that surprising category to you that jumped out?
Again, these are going to be much more defined than they are right now, because electrical is so broad.
Yeah.
When I had to kind of look and say, okay, what do we have? What in actually D-Tools includes the electrical category? So I had to find out what those were. It was surprising to me. It was electrical, lighting, loudspeakers, access control, and networking. I was surprised access control, and all I could figure is that there's the smart door lock category must really be doing well. There was a lot of smart door lock exhibitors at CEDIA Expo. So I think that category is coming in. And again, that could encompass video doorbells. So I got to look. The categories are going to be much more well-defined. But right now they're not.
Okay.
But access control includes that. So I don't know if there was a specific thing, if that was just video doorbells driving that, if that was some sort of MDU solutions driving that. But that one was kind of surprising to me. But other than that, it's kind of standard.
The lighting one, you cited in your findings, you kind of went a little bit more with your own voice. I think, who would have thought that lighting like 5 years ago would be one of the top categories? But I think that's another one that maybe if you drilled down and subdivided it and said lighting control, shades control, or shades and actual lighting fixtures separately, it may not be as big of an individual category, because lighting control has always been strong for a while, but the fixtures part, I think, probably is still a smaller percentage of that, even though
Yeah,
it's
and there were
growing.
quite a few fixture exhibitors at the show.
Oh,
So,
sure.
Color Beam, Lighting Boss, WAC, DMF, Lucifer, Environmental Lights, Prolux, Garden Light. I mean, I'm missing, there was like even a handful more. So, last year at CEDIA, there was maybe 2 or 3 of those guys.
Yeah. Yeah. And they got a lot more interesting in their displays too. They're really starting to learn from that Ketra model of how do you demonstrate at the booth what you do with your lighting, as opposed to just having frankly, some boring fixtures on a table. You can't really learn much off of that, but they were definitely in a much higher presence there. And maybe you're right. Maybe that is just as that category is, and the D-Tool is growing a lot faster than I was realizing in the industry overall. But obviously, it's a trend that we like to talk about, and everyone's trying to learn about it. So maybe that's reflected in the actual sales.
Yeah, I still talk to some integrators who have not delved into the category yet. So, I think there's still a lot of room for growth in that lighting fixture category, and especially with tape, linear lighting as well as the down lighting and specialty light, track lighting. There's lots of different categories, permutations in that area. So, I expect that to grow, and it'll be interesting to see Lightapalooza next year on what that's like. I'm sure that'll be even bigger and better of an event too.
Speaking of events, now in your new role, are you? Do you have any updates on how many types of things you're going to attend in person, just to kind of keep track of trends that you need to be tracking in your data? Or are you mostly going to be getting to take some time to yourself and just dig into the numbers and stay at home?
Well, I can tout that I am going to be at the CEDIA Tech Summits in New Jersey and New York coming up November 14th and 16th, presenting
Okay.
on some of these findings as well as some new findings of other things that I'm going to be talking about. So
Cool.
I'm going to try and get out there as much as I can. But I know you're a road warrior, so I'm hoping I'm not going to be too much of a road warrior. But I got to stay in touch with as many people as I can, because one of the things I'm trying to do with this data is not just throw the data out, but if you notice at the end of the report, I have 3 takeaways.
Yeah.
Okay, here's what you should do with this data, because I think to just put the data out there, people are like, okay, well, what's this? What does this mean to me? What am I supposed to do with this? So every single thing that I do, I'm going to try and have that perspective of, okay, here's 3 things you should try and do or analyze within your own business or actions to take. And the only way I can really get that information is by talking to people.
Okay.
So once I've kind of run the data, then what my protocol is to just reach out to as many people as I can and say, hey, what is your impressions? Why do you think this is? And talk about those sorts of things. And I've got some other things coming up right away. So I'm going to try and do one of these reports every month on some sort of a different subject.
Yeah, and I did like your 3 takeaways, and I felt like as I was reporting on the report, I didn't want to steal your thunder. I wanted to make sure you got your downloads and people would actually look at the report. So I didn't give away what your 3 actions were. How do you feel about sharing a little bit of that? And here, I don't think we're going to steal anything from your ability to get some folks to actually read your report if you give them some hints.
Yeah, no, it's a free download, and again, I recommend if you go on to D-Tools, it's in the I think resources industry insight section is where they put it on the website. But again, we talked about that value engineering that's taking place. So I think one of the takeaways that I had is just really make sure you're not hurting yourself by downgrading your quotes.
Right.
So, at the integrator level, keep those quotes high. Go above and beyond the budget. When that customer, again, says I got $100,000 budget, you come in with $125,000, and then they say, well, that's above. Oh, well, then it's, let me go to the 3 options. Let's go to a different type of speaker or whatever it might be. And then immediately the customer feels like he got a deal. So you're already kind of helping them feel better because you're bringing down that, but you present that proposal at the higher amount with, this is what it costs for everything that you asked for.
Mm-hmm.
And you're not trying to grind them on something, but then, okay, well, if you don't have the budget, maybe I can adjust here or there, and you're still going to end up, I think, maintaining a lot of that, because I would love to see that back at that 58% level versus 47% level, because that's quite a drop off from one year to the next, I think.
Yeah. And then that 40% converted into sales, just really being aware of that, right? Finding a way to maybe improve the closing rate would be a good goal for these companies.
Yeah,
Find
out why that, if you got a competitor that's, like I said, I think it was 3% or 2% of the guys closed 100% of their jobs, and 6% closed 75% of their jobs. So there are companies out there that are doing have much higher closing rates than what this industry average is. So I'm sure integrators know who those companies are, but find out try and emulate those best practices. What is it that they're doing in their proposals that's helping them seal the deal, versus what you might be doing.
Yeah, of course, maybe that one guy, he just does 2 really large projects and he closed both of them, but you never know. But then the last one you said, goes back to that labor product market versus labor rates. Again, trying to get that labor rate higher.
Yeah. So the bottom line always is that it really doesn't matter what your competitor's labor rate is. You need to have a labor rate that is profitable for your company. So I did a thing for several years at CEDIA, working with Leslie Shiner on calculating your break even. So it's probably still up on cepro.com somewhere, but I did an article on how do you calculate it? How do you look at all your direct costs, your indirect costs? I'm sure integrators know how to do that. But once you establish that break even rate, then say, okay, now what do I got to do to make, 35% margin or whatever your target margin is on it. So, I know it's hard to look at the competitor's hourly rate and say, gee, I've got to match that, or people think I'm going to be gouging. But there's such a diversity in this between 1 and 2 man shops that have very little overhead and larger integrators that have overhead that they have to carry. So you can't, you've got to differentiate as to why your rate is higher. If you're one of those that has to carry that overhead, because you shouldn't be putting yourself in a situation where you're not making profit on your margin.
Right.
Or on your labor.
On your labor. Yeah. I mean, maybe your story is that, we provide the service after the sale that you're going to need on the types of products that these are. This is a network-based system, and there's always upgrades and changes that need to be made. And we have the people to do that and to stay on top of this and monitor your systems, whatever that is, hopefully that's the case. So that's why they have the people. But yeah, that's a good point. Make your case for why your labor may be more than the other guys, and your experience.
And you make a good point there. You make a great point there. That service, ongoing service. One integrator I remember telling me, he tells the customer, my job starts when the installation's over.
Mm-hmm.
Because anybody could do the installation, but I'm going to be the one who's going to keep it working for the next 15 years.
Exactly. Yep. Well, Jason, I've taken a lot of your time today. I appreciate you battling through with your cold there and telling us all about this. Great job on this first report. Look forward to continuing to monitor the industry through this data that's really helpful, and hopefully everyone takes a moment and downloads it and reads it.
Thanks, Jeremy. I appreciate you having me.
Jason Knott is Data Solutions Architect and Evangelist for Data by D Tools. Learn more about D-Tools and download their mid-year report at d-tools.com. That wraps up today's show, which was produced by Residential Tech Today, IPW, and Pretty Easy Podcasts. Go to prettyeasypodcast.com if you're looking to get professional production help on your own podcast at an affordable rate. And if you're new to Residential Tech Talks, please subscribe to the weekly podcast wherever you watch or listen to podcasts. Also, check out all the latest residential tech news at the magazine's website, restechtoday.com, where you can also subscribe to the print or digital magazine and to our Tuesday and Thursday email newsletters. Until next time, please stay safe, stay inspired, and let us know if you have a great story to tell.
Residential Tech Talk, lighting specialist, residential tech.
Home automation device, home or smart house.